So first off, good news, computer is up and working. And I am also getting a new Chromebook, so that's a bonus for me. But we're going to wrap up the Byzantine Empire here. The Byzantine Empire study was always going to be a very short kind of mini unit. What you did, the Byzantine Web Quest, was actually what we were going to be doing in class anyway. It's just you would have been checking with me your answers instead of having to submit them with those beautiful Google Forms that are not seeming to work, even though I try and put in correct answers. Thank you for being patient. It's kind of sad because the Byzantine Empire lasted 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, and yet we don't really remember them. And the other thing that saddens me about the Byzantines is how they did eventually fall. I mean, they probably would have fallen anyway. There were always other newcomers who were better, but it was really the invention of gunpowder and the fact that when that wall was built that had kept out so many invaders, that the gunpowder and the cannons is what tumbled it down. And I just feel bad for them because they really held their own for so long. There's not a lot about the Byzantine Empire, not nearly as remembered as the Romans, but one of the main figures is Justinian, which you all are doing a really great job kind of picking out the things that he did that were great as a ruler and some of those not so great negative aspects, Nika Riot being one of them. That he's known for, and also his wife Theodora. They were a really great couple, and they did a lot for the Byzantine Empire. But eventually it does fall, and it falls to the Ottomans, and it is only because really of technology that the wall could not take. So that happened. Although the Ottomans didn't know about the Greek fire, right? That was kind of cool if you read about that, hopefully, that the Greek fire was fire that is on water. And water is supposed to put out fire. So, how do you put out Greek fire? I don't know. Probably didn't. The other thing I want to talk about, and some of you did mention this, was the split in Christianity. Now, I didn't have you read this section. It's page 436, 437 in your book. But it is another historical moment that happens during the Byzantine Empire ruling. And that is, again, the split in Christianity. When you were doing your Christianity search and find, I had you list the three main branches of Christianity. And one of them being the Roman Catholics, the other one being the Eastern Orthodox Church, and then you would have had Protestantism, the Protestants, which we'll talk about in the Middle Ages. But this split occurs really because of the disagreement of who should be the head of the church. The church is always going to be that very important part of government. So who should head it? Over in Byzantine, where they're still believing that they are Romans and thus have an emperor who thus is believed to be chosen by God and is to be worshipped as one kind of, even though they're Christians, they were the head of the church. Why wouldn't they be? They always had been. And then over in Rome, where you did not have an emperor anymore because it was sacked and looted and burned, you had other people who were ruling the church. We will talk more about the Catholic Church when we get into the Middle Ages, but the Pope is the head of the church in Roman Catholicism. So that is a major split that happens. That happens, again, pretty much because of the disagreement who should rule. As I said, when we were talking about Christianity, there came a time where they had to decide exactly what they were believing, and that came about with Constantine. But then again, more years later, it's now who should head the church. And then if you look on page 437, if you're interested in this split and why it happened, there's a nice T-chart that gives some other examples of the differences between Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity. They all believe in the same thing. They all believe that Jesus came, was God's son, died on a cross, rose again, and was the Messiah. That is not disagreed. It's just the practices If you would go into a Catholic church versus a Orthodox church versus a Protestant church, you're going to see the services different. You're going to see who heads it or how the services are given. The insides are going to look different. If you've ever been to the Greek Fest, which one of my favorites, okay? That is a Greek Orthodox church. That is more of the style that you would see, obviously, in the Orthodox belief system. If you go to any of the cathedrals called the saints, St. Peter's, St. Joseph's, that's going to be more, again, of the Roman architecture and again, stylings of Christianity, okay? So, just wanted to touch on that. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the influence that the Byzantines had. Now, again, they all thought they were still Roman because they were the second eastern part of the Roman Empire. They would never call themselves Byzantines. But through the 1,000 years that they sustained past the fall of the western side, they do obviously create their own kind of culture. Again, their churches are going to look different. Their writing becomes different. But one of the places or cultures that actually is very influenced by the Byzantines are the Russians. And if you want, you can join me on page 443, where I'm going to read a little bit about early Russia. Okay, so it says the early history of Russia was strongly influenced by the Byzantine Empire. The first large state in what would become Russia and Ukraine was the Kiev Rus. It was based in the city of Kiev, and it was founded by a people called the Rus. The Rus were Vikings. They will come in the Middle Ages as well, a people from Northern Europe. If you look down a little bit more, this is, again, it's cool, guys. If you look into history, it can be very entertaining. And the last paragraph says, over time, the power of Kiev declined, just as the Byzantine Empire was also declining. Although the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, in time, a new Russian empire developed. The Russian Empire considered itself the third Rome. So you had Rome, founded by Romulus, which grows. You had Constantinople, the new Rome, founded by Constantine, and the Byzantines grew from there. And then you have Russia, influenced by the Byzantines, who were technically Romans, bringing upon themselves the third Rome and taking up the legacy of ancient Rome and the Byzantine Empire. In fact, Russian emperors even took the title Tsar. So if you know anything about this area or this region and their leaders, and you've heard Tsar before, T-S-A-R, it's the Russian version of Caesar. Can't make this stuff up, guys. It's here. It's history. A title used by Roman and Byzantine emperors. So again, I think that's pretty cool. We continue to see the influence not only of the Greeks, but the Greeks through the Romans through the Byzantines through the eastern part, big old Russia. And so, that style, that culture lives on. Exciting stuff. So that's the Byzantines. Again, in history, not much more than some of their cultural aspects. The Hagia Sophia is beautiful. I don't know if you went and you kind of looked through that link that I put on, but it's beautiful, beautiful. Justinian, his wife, the Hippodrome, all that stuff comes from Byzantine. So now we're going to go on to Arabia. And if we were in class, guys, and you know me, and you miss me, you would have been sitting there, I would have taken attendance, I would have been sitting back, the screen would have been down, and you would have heard...
Let's talk about Grammarly.
Grammarly, until the ad leaves, and you would have heard this. It's a little low.
I come from a land from a faraway a place where the caravan camels roam. Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. When the winds from the east and the suns from the west and the sand in the glass is right, come on down, stop on by, hop a carpet and fly to another Arabian night.
Missed that. I put this on the link anyway. If you don't know, that's from Aladdin. And if you've never seen Aladdin, either the animated version or the new live action, I would suggest watching it. The live action is obviously going to be a bit more culturally correct in the buildings and the style and the customs and the culture, but there's nothing like the original Aladdin either. So we're moving to Arabia, and that is where Aladdin would have been located. And so Arabia is a brand new kind of part that we're talking about. It is in the Middle East, but you're going to find Arabia starting on page 450. It is a huge peninsula. And you should say to yourself, well, Miss Natalia, then I already know what it looks like. It's land that is surrounded by 3 sides of water. You are right. It is a huge peninsula, and it is nearly twice the size of Alaska. It lies south of modern-day Iraq and across the Red Sea from eastern Africa. The geography of Arabia influenced its history and culture. Now, we talked about Egypt and the fact that why would you settle in Egypt other than they had that life-giving Nile River? Well, here's the thing. We don't even have that over in the Arabian Peninsula, and yet they still settled, and yet they still survived, and yet they still conquered quite a lot of land. So how were they able to do that? Well, one of the things you're going to read about is the fact that there are these things called oases or oases, which are kind of like little pockets of water that can be found from springs. So they would find these oases, and they would really depend on the water that provided, but they could settle there. Okay, so you're going to read about that. The other thing you're going to read about is you're going to read that there are 2 types of people that live in Arabia at the start. You're either going to have your nomads, who are people who never settle, or you're going to have your people who settle, and again, they're going to be settling in areas where it gets enough rainfall or around an oasis to support them. On page 451, you'll also notice a nice little map at the top. You'll be able to see kind of where they would have been able to survive based on rainfall, okay? And also, you are going to notice 2 really key cities there that will come up later, Mecca and Medina. So what you're going to do is you are going to read page 450 and 451 on Arabia. So we know what this area is like because this area is where our last world religion starts and originates, and that is Islam. What I have given you to do, and I think it's pretty fun, again, we would have done this in class, but you're going to do it on your own. So I have given you what's called Living in Arabia worksheet. I've crossed out everything because you don't need to read the directions. You're not going to be doing this. You don't need to print this out. You don't need to write on it. You don't need to do anything. The only thing it is there for is for you to either choose, do you want to be a nomad and have to live in the desert, traveling around in your caravans, or do you want to settle around an oasis and be a sedentary member of the Arabian Peninsula? Okay, so that's the first thing. You're going to choose. Am I going to live in the desert? Am I going to live in an oasis? Then you're going to choose 3, because there's 10 of them total, 3 things that you feel you need the most to survive as you choose to live. Pick 3. You're going to explain why this is something you would need to survive. And then I'm going to ask you to add a picture. Doable, right? I think so. I'm going to turn you around here. So here is what your slide is going to look like, okay? Again, this is a text box. You're going to put in there the zone you choose, desert or oases. You're going to put a nice little image of either a desert or an oasis. And your name goes over here. Then in here, you're going to type out the skill and item, okay, that you choose. There are 3. You need to explain why you chose that. Don't just write what you need. And you add an image. Okay. I hope that's clear. If you have any questions, you can always comment to me. But we are not going to be in Arabia that long either. Okay, so we're going to learn about the geography, how it affects people's lives. Then we're going to learn about the religious aspect, which is huge. Again, another religion that really is tied to a whole civilization and empire. That's what we're going to do end of this week, obviously, because it's Friday today for you, and into next week. And then we get into Middle Ages that you probably all make the connection with, okay? We're almost there. I appreciate all your work. You know I'm going to keep you on a high standard. I know you might not like Miss Tally sometimes, but hey, I'm here for you. So until I see you next time, because, again, Middle Ages got a lot, so I'll be making a lot of videos. Make sure you watch them so you understand. They may be long, but you're almost there. You're almost there. Bye.